Rain lashed against Bilal, a college student hurrying home. The downpour was relentless, each drop feeling like tiny needles against his skin. His clothes were soaked through, clinging to him uncomfortably as he trudged forward. The wind howled like a banshee, whipping his umbrella inside out. It was as if nature itself was conspiring against him, making every step a battle. The gusts were so strong that they nearly knocked him off balance. He wrestled it back into submission, squinting through the deluge. The rain was so heavy that it blurred his vision, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. He could barely make out the shapes of buildings and street signs. Each gust seemed to whisper his name. The eerie sound sent shivers down his spine, making him feel as though he wasn't alone. The empty streets amplified the feeling of isolation. Bilal's sneakers splashed through puddles on the deserted street. The water soaked through his shoes, making each step squelch uncomfortably. He could feel the cold seeping into his bones. Above, streetlights flickered erratically, casting dancing shadows that stretched and contorted with each pulse of light. The inconsistent illumination made the surroundings even more disorienting. A chill snaked down his spine, colder than the rain. It was a deep, unsettling cold that seemed to come from within, rather than from the storm around him. Bilal quickened his pace. He just wanted to be home, tucked away in his room, far from the unsettling symphony of the storm. The thought of a warm, dry place was the only thing keeping him going. Each step echoed in the eerie silence between the wind's roars. The sound of his own footsteps was oddly comforting, a reminder that he was still moving forward. He fished out his phone, the bright screen a beacon in the darkness. The light was harsh against the night, but it was a small comfort in the storm. No new messages. He shoved it back into his pocket, a sudden wave of unease washing over him. The silence from his phone was almost as unsettling as the storm itself. Why did he feel so watched? The sensation was growing stronger, making him glance over his shoulder repeatedly. The empty streets offered no answers, only more questions. A sharp buzz from his pocket made Bilal jump. He yanked out his phone, heart pounding. An unknown number flashed on the screen. He hesitantly swiped to answer. "You left me behind," a raspy voice whispered through the speaker. Bilal froze, his blood turning to ice. "Who is this?" he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. The line went dead. He stared at the phone, his mind racing. A prank? But who would have his number? He glanced over his shoulder, but the street was deserted. Another violent gust of wind buffeted him, nearly ripping the phone from his grasp. He shoved it back in his pocket, his earlier unease morphing into full-blown fear. The streetlights chose that moment to die one by one, plunging the street into darkness. It was as if the night itself had decided to swallow the light, leaving nothing but an inky black void. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the distant hum of the city that seemed worlds away. Bilal stumbled, his heart hammering against his ribs. Each step felt like a misstep, his feet unsure on the uneven pavement. The darkness seemed to press in on him, a living entity that sought to consume him whole. He was shrouded in an almost tangible darkness. Panic welled up inside him, a cold, creeping sensation that threatened to paralyze him. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound amplified in the oppressive silence. He fumbled for his phone, desperate for its faint light. His fingers trembled as he tried to unlock it, the screen's glow a small beacon of hope in the overwhelming darkness. As he flicked it on, he noticed something strange. The light from the phone cast eerie shadows, distorting the familiar into something grotesque and alien. His shadow, normally elongated by the streetlights, was now grotesquely contorted, writhing on the pavement beside him. It seemed to have a life of its own, twisting and turning in unnatural ways. He whipped his head around, but there was nothing there. The street was empty, devoid of any life. The darkness seemed to mock him, whispering secrets he couldn't quite hear. Just the empty street, the howling wind, and the relentless rain. The elements seemed to conspire against him, adding to the sense of isolation and dread that gripped his heart. He tried to rationalize it away, blaming the flickering light, but deep down, a primal fear took root. It was an ancient fear, one that spoke of predators lurking in the dark, of unseen dangers waiting to pounce. His phone buzzed again, the same unknown number. The screen's light was a stark contrast to the darkness around him, a reminder of the world beyond this nightmare. He almost didn't want to read it, but a morbid curiosity, a pull he couldn't explain, forced him to look. His hands shook as he opened the message, his breath catching in his throat. "You can't outrun me," it read. The words seemed to pulse on the screen, a chilling reminder that the darkness was not just around him, but within him as well. Bilal's breath hitched. He broke into a run, his phone clutched in his hand like a lifeline. The street seemed to stretch endlessly before him, the darkness closing in like a suffocating blanket. He risked a glance back at his shadow. It was no longer a shapeless blob. It was darker, more defined, and it was moving independently, mimicking his movements with an eerie sentience. Terror lent speed to his steps. He had to get to a main road, somewhere with light, with people. He didn't dare look back again, his mind conjuring images too terrifying to contemplate. The wind howled around him, filled with whispers and moans. Or was it his imagination? He couldn't be sure anymore, the line between reality and nightmare blurring with every gust. Section 5, facing his fear. He couldn't run anymore. He was at his wit's end. Bilal stopped, gasping for breath, his legs burning, his chest constricting with fear. He knew he had to face whatever was behind him. Slowly he turned. The street was still empty, the darkness even more oppressive than before. His shadow, however, was gone. Relief, fleeting and fragile, washed over him. Then he felt it, a cold breath at the back of his neck, raising goosebumps on his skin. He whirled around, his heart threatening to burst out of his chest. There, inches from his face, was a hand that was not attached to a body, a hand that was made of the same writhing darkness as his shadow. Section 6. The entity revealed. Bilal stumbled back, a scream stuck in his throat. His phone slipped from his numb fingers, clattering to the pavement, its screen illuminating the gruesome sight before him. It wasn't a hand, it was a face, a grotesque mockery of a human face, formed from the same writhing darkness with eyes that burned like hot coals. It hovered there, inches from his own, its malevolent gaze boring into his soul. He scrambled back, his voice finally returning in a strangled cry. The face lunged and he squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for the inevitable, but the touch never came. He opened his eyes to see the figure retreating, melting back into the darkness. His phone camera activated, the screen displaying a live feed of the space behind him. And there it was. Section 7. Merging Shadows. In the dimly lit room, shadows seemed to dance and merge, creating an atmosphere thick with tension and unease. The air was heavy, almost suffocating, as if the darkness itself was alive, watching, waiting. Standing behind him, where his shadow should be, was the figure. It was as if the darkness had taken form, a silhouette that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The figure was both familiar and alien, a twisted reflection of something deep within. No longer just a face, but a towering skeletal form, its limbs elongated and twisted, its head cocked at an unnatural angle. It was a grotesque parody of a human, a nightmarish vision that seemed to defy the very laws of nature. It stared at him, not with malice, but with a chilling curiosity. Its eyes, if they could be called that, seemed to bore into his soul, searching, probing, as if trying to understand the essence of his being. Bilal stared back, his fear giving way to a strange sense of resignation. He understood now. The terror that had gripped him was replaced by a cold, hard clarity. This was not an enemy to be fought, but a part of himself to be acknowledged. This thing, this entity, wasn't separate from him. It was a manifestation of his deepest fears, his darkest thoughts, given form and substance. It was a part of him that he had long tried to deny, to bury deep within. It was a part of him, his shadow given monstrous life. The realization was both horrifying and liberating. He could no longer run from it, no longer pretend it didn't exist. It was time to face the truth. The figure took a step towards him, and he felt a strange pull. A sensation like being drawn towards a powerful magnet. He didn't resist. He couldn't resist. It was as if an invisible force was compelling him, drawing him closer to his own darkness. As the figure drew closer, he realized the truth in those whispered messages. They had been warnings, echoes of his own subconscious, trying to prepare him for this moment, the moment of reckoning. He had left it behind, this dark aspect of himself, and now it had come to reclaim what it was owed. There was no escaping it. The shadows had merged, and in that merging he found a strange sense of peace. The battle was over. The shadows had won. Section 8. The Final Whisper. The figure reached out, its long, bony fingers brushing against his cheek. He felt a searing pain, like being branded with hot iron. He closed his eyes, surrendering to the inevitable. His phone clattered to the ground, the screen going dark, leaving him in complete darkness. He felt himself being pulled down into the depths of his own shadow. And then he heard it, a whisper that seemed to come from inside his own head. I'm part of you now. Section 9. Epilogue. The storm raged on, but Bilal was gone. The only evidence he had ever existed was a lone umbrella lying discarded on the rain-soaked pavement. And somewhere in the heart of the storm, a shadow stirred, darker and more powerful than before.